Well, it's good to have Dan back with us. Now everybody can stop asking me how he's doing. They can ask him. So we're glad you're here. It's been an interesting week. You know, last weekend we had one of those kind of special weekends in a church. We had a lot going on. We had Friday, we had the celebration of the life of Peter Froelich, and Valerie expressed great appreciation for how that was handled by us and by everybody who reached out to her and gave care to her during that time. And then Saturday, we had Front Porch Friends in the morning, and then we had the celebration of life for Jane Gates. And Julie has expressed how much she has appreciated the way that people have reached out and cared for her family in that time, and just how wonderful she felt like things had been with the church family then. And then Sunday morning, people just kept talking about how they just felt the Spirit flowing through the worship, how the music just seemed like it was just more alive, and the prayers. And Shanna did a communion meditation for the first time in 2 years at the 11 o'clock service, and it was beautiful. And it was just this incredible day. So I figure we'll just rest there. We're good. You know, I think that's what we want to do. When I was younger, I used to hike a decent amount. Then I got more hefty and stopped hiking. And I miss it a little bit, and I don't miss it sometimes. I used to go to a camp, and every year it was a 2-week camp, and on Saturday we would take a long hike, and usually 5 to 8 miles and up a mountain. And it was amazing. You know, we'd go up that mountain, and you'd build some friendships and relationships as you went up together and spent time trying to encourage each other to make it up that mountain. And then you'd get to the top. And there was one of those mountains at that camp where when we were on top of it, we could see 4 corners. So we could be looking at 4 states as we stood on top of that mountain. And it was just beautiful. It made it all worthwhile, all the work of climbing that mountain. And you just wanted to stay there, stay on top of that mountain. And then it was time to go. And going down seemed like we were leaving that experience far too quick. And it was going down. Humans aren't made to go downhill. Literally, we're not made to go downhill. Our legs work well going uphill, but they're not made for downhill. We put even more stress on our legs going downhill than we do going up. But we know that you have to go down to go up. So we get these Jewish ancestors of ours, and they've had a few mountaintop experiences, and they've had a lot of tough climbs. And every year still they get together and they celebrate Passover. They celebrate this time when a whole bunch of children died and their children didn't. And then they, as a reward for that, got to go out and wander around in a desert for 40 years. How exciting. And then it ended with going into a land that was their land. God had given them. And that's what, of course, they're celebrating. But they always, in Passover, talk as much about that journey and the struggles of the journey as they do about the mountaintop of finally reaching the promised land. You see the Festival of Booths in the Bible a couple of times. It's called Shalak. Festival of Booths. That word booth could also be a tabernacle, be a tent. When they had the Festival of Booths, they would go outside their homes, they would build a tent out of palm leaves, and they would live in it for a week. That was their celebration. Let's go outside of our comfortable home, build a tent, and live in it for a week. Jewish people are interesting. It was a reminder to them of their time in the desert when they had the tabernacle and God traveled with them. He kept God's presence with them. But it also, by the time of Jesus, had really come for them to be a celebration of the return from the Babylonian exile. Because if we read in Nehemiah, we see that the first festival that they celebrated when they returned from exile was the Festival of Booths. And so that was their coming home celebration that they had. So when they have the Festival of Booths, they remember this time that Ezra likes to describe as 70 years because we love our numbers to be holy about things, even though it was either 49 or 56 years, depending upon when you think they were taken away. We got a pretty good idea of when they returned. But 70 is a complete number. They celebrated that exile and celebrate it still with the Festival of Booths. I don't believe they still make tents out of palm leaves and hang out outside for a week, but they still celebrate the Festival of Booths. It ends a high, holy, sanctifying day. Interesting things they celebrate. We're going to celebrate this time when we had to come back from being slaves in another land. We're going to celebrate this time when we had to come back from being slaves in another land. So we have today's text. And we see lots of imagery to remind us. Jesus takes his closest friends, Peter, John, and James, and they go up on a mountain. Like Moses went up on a mountain, like Elijah went up on a mountain to talk to God. And they go up on the mountain and they begin to pray. And what happens but Jesus transforms, transfigures. When we get to looking at that, there's a thing in the Old Testament and in Judaism where your countenance displays your heart and your relationship with God. And when you can really see that shining through in somebody, it's like they've become transparent. And so in this imagery, it's like Jesus becomes transparent, and the fullness of that relationship with God, that full understanding of God, is a glowing presence that matches the clothing of the two men who come from paradise, Moses and Elijah, and join him. And Luke is the only one who tells us what those three were talking about on the mountain. It says they were talking about the glory of his departure. Departure is the translation of the Greek word into English. The Greek word is a translation of Exodus into Greek. They're talking about the glory of his exodus to come in Jerusalem. It's easy for us to see that glory now because we know the end of the story. But the disciples who are standing there with them don't have the end of the story. They haven't seen the other side of the 40 years in the desert. They haven't seen the other side of the 49 to 70 years of captivity. They haven't seen the other side of the trouble to come, but they see the trouble coming. It's 15 verses later in Luke that Jesus sets his eyes on Jerusalem and will not be persuaded to go any other direction, but straight into the storm. The storm that they see coming, danger that they see is there. And in this moment on this mountain, Elijah and Moses are saying this is where the glory is going to be. You're going to go through the storm, and you're going to get to the glory. So then, of course, Peter says, this is a holy place. We need to build some tabernacles here. One for each of you. You are all three holy. Because we all want to stay in that spot where we have felt the Spirit of God on us, and we have felt that moment, and we just want to stay there. Says because Peter didn't understand. That's why he did it. And so when that happens, a cloud covers the disciples. And they can't see, and a voice says, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." Now this is echoes of the baptism where Jesus heard, "You are my son, my beloved." Now it's, "This is my son, my chosen." So much of this is for the people who are hearing the story. So much of this is for us. to remind us, to show us, to show the people who first heard Luke, people who really understood, people who are seeing words like cloud and lightning and mountain and voice of God and Moses and Elijah, and are recognizing all of these images from their history, from their holy words. Nice. I'm not going to go into the fact that that may be more holy to many Americans, that Western theme, than this imagery that we're talking about right now. But it's true and it's sad. So anyway, they're hearing all of this. They're connecting all of this, probably in ways that we will never fully understand. But we have the opportunity to try to understand that they're hearing. This mountaintop is reminding us. Moses and Elijah are reminding us. They talked about their scriptures being the law, Moses, and the prophets, Elijah. This is my son, the chosen one. Listen to him. That reflects Isaiah 42. My servant, the chosen one, who will set the captives free. You may have heard it, Jesus referenced it when he started his ministry back in Luke chapter 4. I think we may have covered that somewhere in this series. It's for us. It's for Peter, James, and John. It's for every disciple who's about to follow Jesus, walk down off the mountain, and follow when it's hard, and when things are against us, and when things get tough and we start to argue, and when things get rough and we don't know which way to go, and we get lost in the wilderness. To follow. When we're not sure where we're spiritually going to get fed next, or we're not sure what the forces that are working against God and against us are going to do to us. The last moment on the mountain before we follow. Jesus goes right from doing this to go and heal a man, son, who his disciples couldn't heal, had been trying to heal him and couldn't heal him. He continues to do the hard work that they're not ready for yet. Continuing to invite them into it. I pray for mountaintops all the time. I love them. I love going to camp because there's almost always a mountaintop experience at camp. It's also one of the difficulties of camp because then you get these youth and you give them this experience, this mountaintop experience where everybody is focused on the same thing. Everybody has been learning the same thing all week and focusing on it and talking about it. And every night you've been worshiping together and you get these worships that are just spirit-filled and wonderful and focused. And then they leave camp. They come down off that mountain. And they don't see that every week because that doesn't happen every week. Because they haven't spent that whole week all together. They haven't spent that whole week all focusing on the same thing. Life happens, and life pulls us apart and separates us and gives us different things that we need to focus on. And so it takes a lot of work and effort for those times that we come together and we have those mountaintop experiences. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes working through tragedy like we had to last weekend to remind us and really pull us into that place of recognizing how important our community is for one another and for everybody outside of our community and the work that we have to do. So let's love our mountaintop experiences, and then let's come down off the mountain and walk right into the storm together. Amen? Let's pray. God, we're grateful, ever grateful, that you are willing to spend the time to help us see. To help us see things transformed into the way you would have them be seen, the way that Peter, James, and John were able to see Jesus transformed. And we're thankful that you would take the time and the effort to make us hear. The way you took the effort to make sure that Peter, James, and John knew to listen to the one that they follow, not to listen to the other voices and other forces that are going to tell us different things. We thank you, and we follow.